I'm happy to be with you today. I hope your meal has been great, but I know because Elena has helped to prepare this, she always likes to go top of the line, so I'm sure that has. I promise I won't keep you very long, so anything that I can do to try to help you be able to get out a little bit earlier this afternoon, I promise to try to do that. Right? As I get started going through this, if you have questions, don't feel free. Just hold your hand up. Elena says this has been a good flow and that, it's formal, but it's informal. So just stop me. And if I'm going off on a tangent somewhere that you don't really want to go, just flag me down. I'll stop and redirect. Okay? As we start off this afternoon, I would like those of you who are finished eating, and I see like most people are, if you would just stand for a second, please. And if your food is so good that you don't want to, just sit. But other than that, I need you to stand up for me. And if you would just look around at each other, right, and just give yourselves a round of applause. You really can do better than that because it's about you. The applause is for you. The applause is for our first offenders. The applause is for those of you who, without knowing what you're doing, you respond, okay? So have a seat. Whether you realize it or not, and I feel like most of you do, the people in this room, you change lives. You save lives. You help others. You make a difference. And sometimes you make a difference and you don't even realize for the fact that you're actually making a difference. As I was trying to prepare for this difficult task, I wandered back to an old movie. It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas movie. Any of you familiar with that? Elena's shaking her head. I know she is. Okay, that's great because I wasn't familiar with it. My wife put me onto it. I have to give her a little credit because she's always coming up with these ideas. So in the movie, James Stewart plays this guy George Bailey, and George's his life has been up and down, common life type of a thing. It gets to be Christmas Eve, and George is he's just not feeling it. He doesn't feel his worth. He doesn't feel like he has contributed as much as the people in the town around him. And the story takes place in a small town, Bedford Falls, New York. And George just gets fed up. He goes to this bridge, and he's going to commit suicide. That's what he's going to do. And he's got a guardian angel he didn't necessarily know he had. He's got his guardian angel. And the guardian angel comes and talks to him. And, he says, I just don't want to live this life. And so the guardian angel snaps his finger and changes his whole life around, right? And all the things that had happened, right, instead of them being stopped, when George didn't even realize that he had stopped these things from happening, and when the guardian angel changed him, put him in a different town and changed his whole life around, all these things that George had actually stopped from happening, the angel showed it to him, and they did happen. So, like, he had saved a life. He saved his brother's life. His brother then went off to the military and got a prize for being a great soldier. And so his brother saved a lot of lives. He worked at a pharmacy, and he had caught an error that the pharmacist had made. And that error that he caught prevented somebody from dying from the wrong prescription. And there was a greedy banker in town, and the fact that he held on to this company that his father died and left him, and he fought this banker. And by doing so, the town stayed small and rural and then turned into casinos and a wild life. And so when his life got changed around, he saw all of these things happen, and nobody really knew who he was. So he tried to talk to people, and it was the same people, but they didn't know him. And so, just like George in this movie, I kind of equate that to the first responders. A lot of times, the things that you do them, You do them without a moment's notice. You just respond. Your training takes you, it walks you right through it. It doesn't call for you to stop and think. It doesn't call for you to roll out a manual, right? You respond, you get this call, you end up on the scene, you respond, and you handle it. And when it's over, you pack up all of your gear, you go back, and you wait for the next call. You don't really see what happens to that person that you just helped. You don't know what kind of circumstances that was. You don't know what results that had. And so sometimes you don't think about how valuable you are to our communities. Don't be like George. By and large, the public really has no idea, or the public doesn't value you. It's kind of like with the police. And right now, in our country, we're going through a lot about our policemen and how they respond to certain things. And we can all form an opinion until that person breaks in your house. And when the person breaks in your house, then even though he took your oldest TV in the house that wasn't worth but $55 anyway and walked out with it, but you want him locked up and you want me to keep him for 30 years. When it's you, it makes a difference. When it happens to somebody else, then we have an opinion. The same thing with paramedics, the same thing hospital staff. Whoever it is that's a first responder, the things that you do on the scene at the time, the public seems to miss those things. Your value to our community is so much more. You're game changers. You may not realize it, and I don't know how many of you do sports, but I'm sure there are Alabama and Auburn fans, and Alabama fans are gloating this week. And Auburn fans don't really know how much longer we're going to keep Malzahn if he keeps trying to play 3 quarterbacks in one game. But if Malzahn's plan had worked and they had beat Clemson, he'd be the greatest person in the world right now. See? You know? But game changers, right? And you're game changers because you make a difference. Sometimes it's hard to see, and sometimes people are unappreciative of the things that you do, but you do make a difference. No matter what the day is, or what hour it is, doesn't matter what the weather is, if you're at work, you're on call. You're expected to respond. And sometimes, when you're not at work, you're still on call. And there are those who still expect you to respond. As tragic as 9/11 was, I think the most prolific thing that came out of the whole story of 9/11, it wasn't the Twin Towers actually falling. It was the response of the people in New York City and around the country. As people reached out to do whatever they could to try to help. Didn't make any difference what race you are, what nationality you were. Didn't make any difference whether you spoke English or Spanish. It didn't matter. People knew that we had a tragedy, and our first responders, they showed people from all across the country. They showed people in New York City who were off, who hadn't had an off day. They was at their limit for their off days, right? When things started happening, people just showed up. Most of our situations are not that prolific. They happen in subtle ways, but they're just as important. And you live day to day not necessarily knowing when that big event will actually hit. And so it's important that you stay ready, not just sometime, but you're ready all the time. You arrive on the scene, you assess the situation, you create a perimeter, you try and make the area safe. You gather intel as your brethren begin to respond. You prepare yourself, gather yourself to be able to pass along information while focusing on all of those things that I just said and trying to keep a level head at the same time. You must remain alert because things can change quickly. You don't get to pick to choose the calls that you want. You get a call and you respond. You deal with victims, their children, deal with the elements of the weather. It doesn't make any difference when it's icy cold, and for us in the South, icy cold is difficult to deal with. It doesn't make any difference. It's tornadoes like we had in Tuscaloosa that came through. That day was a tough day for our first responders. And more situations, difficult situations happen like that. And you have to be prepared. And so you have conferences like this. You go through training. And sometimes you sit in the training classes and you nod off a little bit. But when you really think about it, right, that might have been that key point that you really, really needed to know for that next incident that you had. So in corrections, you say, Culliver, what kind of first responder stuff do you do in corrections? Because I doubt if there are very many corrections people in the room. And we're not necessarily looked at as being first responders. I graduated from the academy in 1981, I think it was. It was a long time ago. I just met an ex-football player of mine in high school, Dennis, and I had no idea who Dennis Blair was. He's going to speak to you guys next. And we were talking about high school, and he's coming up on his 40th, which means it's my 39th. So, whew. And I try not to really remember because I feel great, right? But the hair kind of tells a story. But I can remember my first event, coming out of the academy, 6 weeks, and I was sent to Fountain Correctional Facility. And Fountain is what we call in corrections is built on the telephone design, telephone pole design. It's a long hallway, and you have these housing units that come off to each side, right? And our staffing situation in 81, late 81, was about like it is now. It's tough on us now. It's tough on our staff. And so I had 2 cell blocks on either side, and I had ventured back to the main hallway, and I'm standing there, and I thought I was like really sharp, like the gentleman is sitting right here in his uniform. He's sharp, pressed down. My little badge was all shiny. My name tag was blue and white, and it stood out. My shoes were spit shine, And I took that pose, and I'm standing on the corner, and all this stuff is just happening around me. It made some moving back and forth. And there's a commotion that's right next to me. This is my first stabbing that I witnessed, but I really didn't witness because I didn't see the guy get stabbed, for real. But I saw the results of the stabbing. And I guess, in reality, that was my first responder event. Although I don't think the term was actually coined at the time, but that was my first. And I remember getting the guy and calling for some help. We didn't have radios and things like that. We blew a whistle, which people would respond. And got the guy out, and we got him out to the healthcare unit. Get relieved, and I come back down the hallway, and I'm thinking, this may not be what I signed on for. Because when I came out of college and I took this job, it wasn't even called correctional officer. It was correctional counselor. And because I had a degree and it was a correctional counselor, I thought I was signing up to be able to go sit at the desk, dress, come in, let me tell you, listen to a couple things, push you back out. But it was really uniform, badge, da-da-da. I oftentimes, as I walk through the facilities now, remember that day as I see our 21 to 25-year-olds who really are oblivious to some things that's going on around them. And it can be a scary world inside the facility if you allow it to be. I made up in my mind that day that for my own life preservation, that I need to pay more attention, that I need to be more attentive, and that it was a serious situation. As I've been in this business now for right at 35 years, and I've made my way to central office, and I can tell you that sometimes the stress in the central office is worse than the stress inside the facility. On last week, Holman Correctional Facility is what we call a close custody facility. If you look at YouTube, if you've been watching the media, if you've done any of those things, you know that over the past 6 months, we've had 2 fairly significant incidents, now 3, to happen at Holman. Of course, the inmates have the cell phones, and when they set the fires inside the facility, they were filming it and they were talking about what they had done, and it was fixing to go down, and all of these things that they're saying. So, not so much as a first responder to that incident, but part of my duties is to manage our correctional and emergency response teams. So when you get that call in the middle of the night that you are having problems, and try to relieve those situations, and you call on these guys who get a slightly increased pay differential to leave their families and put their lives on the line to go and try and calm these situations. And in March, when the first event happened, I think I was just getting to the house, and I went inside and was talking to my wife, and I got this call. And they were explaining to me what the situation is, and I changing clothes, and trying to get back to the vehicle, and trying to call Commissioner Dunn, and trying to make sure search's rolling. And all kinds of things go through your head as you're trying to get to the scene. And I've been fortunate from the standpoint I've been able to, God's blessed me to be able to multitask. So I've learned to do several different things at one time. Some of them are not safe, and I realize that they're not safe. But I can read email on my phone. I can send email on my phone. I can work my siren and my lights. I can hit on brakes real hard to keep from hitting somebody in the ass because they won't get out the way. I can curse and nobody has to hear me because I'm by myself. Right? But that's kind of the world in corrections as a first responder, at least from my position. On this past week, we were at Point Clear for our leadership convention or conference. And I was in a meeting. We had a sidebar meeting with the commissioner and to get briefed on some things. And while I was in the meeting, my phone goes off. So I glanced down at the phone, and it was one of my coordinators. And I ignored the call. And then the other phone starts going off. And I know I've got a situation, but Commissioner is actually briefing us on some things that's fairly important. I also know that answering the phone call right then wasn't going to change whatever it was that was happening. So I learned to pace myself with that as well. But I found out as I walked out of the meeting that one of our correctional officers had been stabbed in the head. The shift lieutenant was right outside of the dining hall door. She was actually running a pill call. And she looked and saw the altercation taking place. She had the presence of mind to shut the situation down there, and she went into the dining hall. She was able to get the suspect, call for relief or call for assistance, make sure there was nothing else happening to the officer, and get the suspect out. The officer suffered a burst blood vessel to the brain. On Friday, when we finished up ELC, I went by the hospital to see him. Initially, the prognosis was not very good, that he would even make it through the night. That's a tough situation. And you walk in, the outside of the ICU, the lobby area for ICU, and the family is sitting around. And you introduce yourself by title, you say who you are and that you're responsible. The wife and 2 daughters were sitting there. It's hard to find the appropriate words to say. And you find yourself saying, "Are you okay?" But if you flip that switch, then that's really an idiotic-ass question to ask if you're okay if your spouse is in ICU. His wife is tremendously strong. She fought back some tears. She talked. She took me to his room. She left me with him. And went back and we talked a little bit. She cried a little more. Every day, I realize just how tough that is, and I realize just how tough it is on the staffs that we have in our facilities. Had it not been for the lieutenant, though, that responded so quickly to get additional assistance, to make sure that that person did not stab him again, and we may have had a homicide. You never, never, never know when it's going to be that moment. You always, always, always have to be prepared. And a lot of times you don't know what you even prepared for. You just prepared. When there are days like that in your world, it's important for you and me to be able to take care of yourself. It's important for you to do whatever it is that you do to debrief that. If you're one of those persons who like to go back and write it down, that's good. It's important for you to be able to do that. If you're somebody that needs to talk to somebody else to be able to get that out, then it's good for you to be able to do that. And you need to have that person on the ready all the time, because you don't ever know when you're going to need that. The Department of Corrections have critical incident stress management teams. when we have serious situations that happen in the facilities that affect our staff, and we deploy the teams from a regional standpoint. They've had training, stress management. They sit with the staff, allow staff one-on-one to be able to talk to the different counselors. And it's basically people who have an interest in being able to help others that we train as counselors. And it's good. If you don't have that in your organization, it would be something worth looking into to be able to have, such that your staff can go have somewhere credible to be able to go to and talk to, such that you don't have all of this flabber out in the community. You can kind of keep it in the house, but at the same time, it gives a relief. And it's somebody, they're talking to somebody that knows what they're talking about. It's not like sitting and talking to a counselor who hadn't worked in the corrections, or it's not like sitting for a person who's not a paramedic and talking to somebody else over here. Not that that individual can't help you, but it's important when you're trying to get it out and get your story out that the person sitting across from you can relate and they know what you're talking about. Or at least I feel like that's important. So we push our wardens and their executive teams to be participants. We push our people to get to know your staff. I think that's a key point. Your supervisor needs to know your mannerisms. They need to know what it is that makes you tick. They need to know that if you are jovial and happy when you come to work every day, or you left out in a car and you were jovial and happy when you left out, but when you come back in, your mood, your disposition has totally changed, right? I normally would slap you on your back or ask you about the Razorbacks or comment about that jump shot last night. I just walk by you, go to my locker, I don't say anything. It's a problem. It may not be a serious problem, but it's a problem. And as supervisors, you need to be able to recognize if you keep your people so far away from you, though, because you're trying to be one of those pseudo leaders, you might miss that. So many problems as we have in the department, we have very few suicides. I can't say that for a marriage rate. It's kind of like a trade-off. And sometimes it might be better to leave than to commit a homicide than to try to stay. And, But it's important. It's important for you to know your people. It's important for you to know that person that rides in the vehicle with you. It's important for you to know their children or know something about them. And then it's important for you just to know you. You need to be able to tell when I've had enough. I need a break. I need a couple of days. It's important for you to be able to do that so that you can realize, recognize, and separate yourself before you blow up, say things that you shouldn't have, smash your door in, kick a window out, do something really, really crazy. All of those things are important, and we all handle stress in all kinds of different ways. So if you're a shopaholic and you love to shop and you restrain yourself from shopping, but you're feeling really pressed, go spend a little money. Buy you a couple of purses, get you a manicure, pedicure. I do that now. About every month I get my hands done. About every 3 months I get my feet done. It's just a little something to just make you feel good, Ain't no law against feeling good. There's nothing wrong with feeling good about you, right? So if you get your nails done, I like mine buff shine, and I don't have a problem telling you. And if you ain't got them right, then I'm going to see it, because I'm going to pay you, but I like them right. And I don't want you to do it with that manual thing. I want you to buff shine them, because that burns my nails, and I don't want my nail bed burned, so I want them done right. And you don't have to do a whole lot of work on my feet, because I'm going to keep them up to the point you don't have to work really hard. I just like to be able to sit there in the chair with it vibrating, the water hot, right? You're going to massage my thighs down. You're going to massage my calf and stuff down. And you're going to wash. I just like that. But when I walk out of the salon, I feel good. Monday I come back, people take a look at your nails. They don't look good right now. People take a look at your nails. So, you have to be comfortable with you, but you have to do things. So that's not your thing, and you like to go fishing? Go fishing. Don't find a way to go fishing. Don't find time. Make time to go fishing. You make time for everything else. Those of you who have young children, make time. I promise you they grow up fast. I have 2 sons. Jordan turned 26 on Saturday, one of those days. I didn't forget, though. I called. We chat. 26 is an interesting age. He's still trying to find himself for real. But he found himself on his own dime, not my dime. My youngest son is 23. His head is a little bit more level, and he's a little bit more focused. And we realized that pretty much at an early age that they different. So you had to treat them different. Taylor, he probably got cheated a little bit, a couple of years, because Jordan was 1.5 years, 2 years older, but we ended up treating him the same way. So he might have missed out a little bit, but it actually might have helped him a little more, because he matured a little faster. In 2009, I was promoted from warden to institutional coordinator, and I moved to Montgomery. Jordan was in his first year of college, and Taylor had 2 years left in high school, and it was going to be a travesty if we tried to take him out of high school and bring him to Montgomery and put him in high school. So we made the decision that they would stay and I would commute. He played basketball and soccer. I didn't miss a home game, basketball. I would get off in the evening. I would hit the highway. And varsity basketball starts about 7:45. If you go through that circle, it's the girls, the JV play, and the girls varsity play, and the boys varsity play. And just before tip-off, I was normally walking inside the gym just before tip-off. And when the game was over, I waited for him to come out of the locker room. We talked about whatever it was that I saw, that I thought he needed to do, and he told me that he was the one playing basketball, and that was 25, 30 years ago when you played, and I got this, and I got in my vehicle, and I drove back to Montgomery. I wouldn't miss that. I would encourage you to do the things that you have to do so you don't miss that, because they grow up so fast. And it's so important. One of the things that affects our country today is the fact that how much time we spend with our children and what we do with them. And so instead of them causing you stress, if you take some time and spend some time with them, they can help to relieve some of your stress. Sometimes when you start thinking about your children, you think about the children that are around them or those that associate with them. And if your child hadn't been to jail, don't have anybody pregnant or is not pregnant, then as a parent, you really should applaud yourself on the back, because you did all right. Because when you just look at their friends, right? And we have good friends in Baldwin County, and this young man They grew up together. From the time that we moved there, they grew up together. He was smart. Dad's a doctor. Mom's a principal. One night, foolish as it sounds, he decided to rob the place that he was working at. Like, who wouldn't recognize you if you work in a place? Who wouldn't? But it's like, who would have ever thought, with them coming up, that he would have made a dumbass move like that, right? Because that's all that was, probably smoking dope, but most of that was a dumbass move on his part. Decent kid, nobody got hurt, but it could have been one of mine. Could have been. Right? So it's important to take the time, spend the time with your children. It's important for you to do whatever it is to relieve your stress. Get it off your chest. I love football. I'm glad it's back, right? I graduated from Southern Miss. I was in Lexington on Saturday. I was cursing real bad, real bad in the first half. I was happy because we scored first. We blocked the punt, got the ball, drove it in, scored. Then it kind of went downhill from there. Halftime, the score was like 35-17, but it had been 35-10. And, you know, my friends and my circle were around me. Can we come back? Hell no. We're going to see what they do at the beginning of the first quarter. If we don't, we're going to the bar. They came out. They scored. Scores 35-24. And Kentucky never scored again, and we won 44-35. You know, you're talking about, it's just like exhale. Right? Good friends, good people, those people who stabilize you, your family, stay close, stay with them, find ways to get rid of your stress, find what your nick is, find what it is you do. Train, and train so that you're always ready, that you're always prepared. Just a couple more points. I said earlier that central office stress is different from the institutional stress, okay? In our building, the second floor, all the executives on the second floor, right? The commissioner is doing a tremendous amount of work to try to make this a team, make this a circle, make this connect, right? People can be difficult to work with, and when they're difficult to work with, it can cause you stress if you let it, right? One thing I've learned is to let a lot of things come and go. Unlike when Elena and I were going back and forth, it would have made more sense for me to just let it go, or for her to just let it go. And she finally did, just let it go. It ain't worth keep asking them questions about. Okay, it's a lot easier to do that. It's the same thing with my wardens at the facility. I would much rather deal with the stress from my CERT teams being out because I know we train and we train and we train than to sometimes deal with my wardens at the facilities and some of the decisions that they make. In closing, don't devalue you. Don't ever wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, why? Don't ever shortchange the value that you bring to your community. How important and how significant that you are in your community for the service that you do. I thank you for the opportunity. I would ask you guys to stand and give yourselves a hand again, but I think you might think that I'm trying to get a round of applause for me, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.